The following podcast is being brought to you by the Defy Life Podcast Network.
Welcome to Aftergate, powered by the Defy Life Network.
Are y'all ready?
Aftergate is a podcast series highlighting Colgate alumni of color in their professional endeavors aftergate.
Are y'all ready?
Aftergate is hosted by Alvin Glimpf, aka Al, and Herman Dubois, aka Jerry.
Are y'all ready?
We are doing Aftergate because Colgate University has produced innovators who have changed the world every day, yet many alumni of color and the mainstream Colgate community are unaware of the amazing accomplishments of alums of color.
Are y'all ready? Hello. This is your boy, Alvin Glimpf, co-host of this podcast known as Aftergate. And it is awesome to be back. As always, we are in the midst of season 2, a season that surpassed season 1, surpassed all of our expectations. And we are running strong, full of the energy coming out of our reunion, but also full of energy because we are about to have a historic conversation. We're about to talk with OG status. Looking forward to that. But before we get into that conversation, let me introduce my co-host, friend, brother of over 30 years, Mr. Herman Dubois. How you doing, sir?
All is well here in the Sunshine State. Can't complain. I want to first thank you and our guests for accommodating my schedule, because I know there were some adjustments and some tweaks, and I appreciate that. Heading up to Orlando for another community mural project. Excited about what's to come there. It'd be symbolic because now I would have been able to say I've covered 2/3 of the state in my programming by having South and Central Florida. All of us, all the youth detention centers would have hosted Hope murals. But feeling good and excited about our next guest. It's not too often we get to speak to legends. It's important that we embrace them, engage them, and get the wisdom and get back to our traditional storytelling culture that we've lost.
So for those who don't know, because I always like to remind folk, because we are definitely this is our eldest guest, so he's going to bring in a new demographic when he shares a link with some of his network. So let me make sure they are fully aware that, for those who don't know, Aftergate is a weekly podcast where all we are trying to do, and I say all in air quotes, is lift up the stories of alumni of color from Colgate University, documenting, highlighting, amplifying their accomplishments since they graduated Colgate. We are honored to be the tools to do this, and we take it very, very, very seriously. So that being said, if it's all right with you, Mr. Dubois, I would like to start the interview and bring in our guest.
Let's do it.
That's all right with you? Then okay. Aftergate Network, I would like to officially welcome Mr. Greg Threatte, also known as Dr. Greg Threatte, to the show. Welcome, us, brother.
Glad to be here.
We have reverence, so we was raised right. So
we're gonna come correct.
Well, the first thing I said to myself as my retirement approach, that I wanted to get back to being who I was rather than what I did.
Oh, amen.
Oh, wow. Well, I want to go so much deeper into understanding that, but I'm already excited to hear what that that's just like gems I need to hear right now.
Good stuff. Thank you for being part of this show, part of the podcast, because I'm positive now that I see your face, we have met. Yes. And we were I believe on a panel years ago, talking about our experiences during our time at Colgate. And so I have a little bit of an introduction to you, but looking forward to learning more during this podcast. But we always like to share where our paths might have crossed so that folks get some type of context. Is this a person that we know really, really well, or are we all learning at the same time? So I do have a sense of what you've accomplished, but this is going to go in depth at that. So looking forward.
Well,
So let's go
lived
back. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I lived in Manlius, New York for 26 years. So for up until I retired, I was only like 45 miles away from Colgate. So I was frequently there.
Awesome.
Most people have ran into me who've come back for various and sundry reasons because, you know, it's a place near and dear to me, and I've made it back frequently.
Let's go. Let's get it started. So let's start from the beginning. So you are class of 1969. So you graduate high school 1965.
Right.
So give us a sense of 1965. What's the world like generally? What's the world like where you live? Give us a sense of how you even learned about Colgate. Set the context of pre-Colgate for Greg.
Okay. I grew up in a coal mining town in southwestern Pennsylvania. My father died in a coal mine when I was 3, leaving my mother with 3 boys. 1950, there's no welfare or anything like that. So she basically left for Chicago, and I was raised by foster parents about 3 miles away from where my brothers were raised by my grandparents. And so grew up in a town that is so small, it doesn't have a zip code. Half the people use the Fairbanks zip code. The other half the people use the New Salem zip code. The town was so small that I grew up in house 120. They numbered the houses rather than the streets.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And it was an area where, like, my high school was sort of coal miners, kids. And I think at no time did I know anybody other than school teachers that had gone to college. And so, but my high school was a football factory.
Wow.
My freshman year in high school, my high school quarterback was first team, all conference, all state, all American. And Joe Namath was second team, all conference, all state, all American. I was down that area where they used to say all the quarterbacks came from.
Yeah.
So that's where I grew up. And the number of scholarships you got was sort of a measure of your virility, even though you knew nothing about what college was supposed to be about. And I had 1 basketball scholarship, 18 football scholarships. And when it finally settled down, my coach tried to cut a deal with Colgate, Cornell, and Penn, and said, whoever says he doesn't have to play football, he would deliver.
Wow.
And Colgate gave me a financial aid scholarship. So I came to Colgate to play football. One of the, and I was a complete country bumpkin. You know, I was so far out of my element. Woody Berry and Bob Boney and many of the folks just laughed at me because I was so country. And really, the weirdest day of my life was the first day of class at Colgate. And they said we had to register. And what's that? You have to go pick out the classes you're going to take. I wrote about this in my 50th reunion yearbook. Yeah, you had to pick out the courses you were going to take. Well, nobody ever let me pick out courses before. I just took what they told me to take in high school.
Mm-hmm.
And I wound up shortening the experiments. I wound up taking calculus and geology 101, along with the 2 core courses.
Not recommended for most freshmen.
Well, geology 101 was known as rocks for jocks.
Right.
Okay.
It still was when I was there.
Yes. So I was rocks for jocks, and so I got off to a stormy start. After football season was over, I was told I had to go find a board job. And financial aid sent me up to Lathrop Hall, and where I met with Jim Lloyd, who gave me a job being a lab assistant in the physics department. And sort of that spring, my first January studies project was learning to program computers on this old IBM 1620 in McGregor Hall.
Wow.
And then Jim Lloyd and Charlie Holbrow started encouraging me to take some physics courses and go into physics. I took physics in the spring and slowly became a physics major. And I'd like to say that that was a transformation for me that I think occurred only because I was at Colgate. Because if I'd have been anywhere else, I'd have been, my kids went to a famous university who the faculty was anything but encouraging. And if I'd gone to local campus, in Uniontown, Pennsylvania, that wouldn't have been much of encouragement. But here were 2 professors who believed in me long before I believed in myself.
Wow.
And I basically became a physics major.
Wow.
And so you say, how did I jump from physics to medicine?
Yeah.
Okay. It was an interesting story in that the summer of my junior year, which was a month after the 1968 sit-in, I went to Chicago, where both my brothers and my mother were, and got a job working along with my brother with the medical center YMCA. And this is one of the Richard J. Daley keep black kids off the street for the summer, because the summer of '68
was interesting.
Yes, the summer that they beat up the hippies at the Democratic National Convention, and I was living in Hyde Park, watching it on TV. But after that summer, and part of that was taking young African American kids up to Cook County Hospital, trying to get them interested in medical careers. And, we did that and we also built a playground and a pool hall. We renovated, and it was sort of a full-scale youth program. I come back to Colgate, And within the first month of school, I started getting these flyers from the Boston medical schools, the Philadelphia medical schools, encouraging me to apply to medical school at these schools. Well, I was in pre-med.
Mhm.
So I didn't have all the courses. And one day I wandered into the coop and ran into Fred Whiter, who was the biology professor. And I said, this is the most, you're a pre-med advisor. This is the most facetious thing in the whole world. All over the country right now, they have medical schools recruiting Black students.
Mm.
And at the high school level, you got medical students have high school kids being encouraged to go into medical careers and shadowing doctors and et cetera. What's in between? Pre-med, the minefield that kills all.
Right.
Okay, this is totally superficial to work at the medical school level and high school level with nothing in between. And out of every 100 kids who want to go to medical school, by the junior year, there's only 10 left. And how do you expect to produce minority physicians that way?
Right.
And apparently he took it to heart, because about a week later, I come walking into Coop, and there was Fred Whiter, John Head, what was the geology professor's name? But anyway, there were like 4 faculty members. And they wanted to know whether I wanted to do anything about my complaint. And why not work? Why don't you sign up for an independent study, and let's work on a inner city and rural pre-med program. And that's what I did. And Bob Boney joined the committee, Bob Seberg. And we had about 5 students and 5 faculty members. And we put together this $3.2 million Ford Foundation grant application for an inner city and rural pre-med program. And what we did at Colgate is, at Colgate, since we only had 4 courses a semester, the only way you could take the 10 pre-med courses is if you majored in biology or chemistry, because you didn't have enough course. I mean, you wouldn't have been able, unless you majored in something that took up a big block of those courses, you wouldn't have had time to major in anything else. So we created a major, got it passed by the faculty committee, where you could major in political science, sociology, and just take the 10 courses.
Wow.
And it would fit into the major and you graduate. Now, this idea was repeated in 1984. There was a GPEP, the General Preparation and Education of Physicians, where they said the same thing. We need to stop, why major in chemistry or biology? None of the medical schools are going to accept your coursework. You're going to take the whole thing all over again. Undergraduate is when you should take other things that help you in community medicine. And so we wrote that all up and sent it off. Well, first week in November, and this is part of the Colgate network, Elwood Stephen Berry, named commonly known as Woody Berry, graduate, was a Black young man who had graduated in '67, 2 years before me. He had gotten hired by Upstate Medical Center as a minority recruiter. But of course, he had just gotten hired. The missions deadline was December 1st. And I come home from class and he's sitting on my porch saying, look, I got this job. The admissions deadline is already passed, but I had to have some numbers and make it look like I've at least tried to fulfill my responsibility. And so we sit there and hemmed and hawed. And finally, I let him fill out the application. I told him the answers to the questions. And I said, good, you got your application.
Wow.
Hope you're happy. He says, yeah, and I hope you're happy too, because there's this page, the back, where you have to make a personal statement that you have to fill out. And well, okay, I took a couple of days and I filled out the personal statement, but all I did was just sort of regurgitated some of the stuff from our Ford Foundation grant and put it in there and sent it off.
I have a question about that Ford Foundation grant. What was the name of the, I guess, pre-medical program? Did you guys title it at all? Do you remember?
Yes. No, I don't remember. I think it was rural. It was just called Rural and Inner City Pre-Med Program.
I only asked because I benefited from a very similar program model out of New York City, out of A. Philip Randolph High School, and actually so did Alvin's wife, who's also a Colgate grad. And it was a initiative that identified Black and brown students within the 5 boroughs of New York City public schools that were trying to get them not only on a college readiness track, but on a pre-medical track. And it was called the Macy Medical Professions Program. And it was, and they set up a model where through the CUNY system, we would take accelerated courses in high school that by junior and senior year, we were taking classes at City College with some of their med students. And the idea was to have more of us be introduced to this at a fast track. Many of us ended up not going into medicine for the very reason that you described, was that sort of weeding out process that many of us went in thinking we had to major in biology or chemistry, which was a no bueno experience. And so we dropped like flies. But I was curious because that was also a privately funded initiative from a foundation.
Well, Woody only admitted one class to Upstate, the class that I was in.
And you were in, that's it, got it.
And he sold them on the notion that I wasn't a pre-med. I had taken inorganic chemistry, but I hadn't taken organic. But if I get an A in quantum mechanics, I shouldn't have any trouble with.
You're like, come on, give it to me. Give it to me.
Not a problem.
Okay, and they bought it.
Hey, good argument.
But Woody went on right after that admission season to set up what was first called the SEEK program in Syracuse. Then it became the Cooperative College Center. Then it became the Morrisville EOC program in Syracuse.
Okay.
And Mo Haskins went up to Oswego and helped set up the EOC program up there. So
Okay.
a lot of the ideas that were in that grant application got spread by, you know, Bob Fullerlove went on to become the Associate Dean of the School of Public Health at Columbia School of Public Health. Before, well, he was the Dean of the faculty of the Cooperative College Center. Bob Boney was the Administrative Dean of Cooperative College Center. He went on to become Vice President of Supportive Services at Syracuse University. And I worked with him when I came back as Deputy President for Minority Affairs. So a lot of us spread out and were in, derivatives of that grant. I wish I could tell you I could put my hands on the grant, because actually when Colgate applied for the Howard Hughes grant in 87, 88, I brought the grant down and that was sort of used part of that. So that grant wound up all kinds of places.
He was like, y'all may want to take a look at this, gentlemen.
Right. This is successful.
And the truth of the matter was, between 68, 69, when we wrote it, and 86, you could just dust it off, have it retyped, because it was typed on the old IBM typewriter.
Right.
And submitted it again, because nothing had changed.
Right.
Yeah.
Because it was about opportunity.
Yeah,
So
it was, most of the things that you would say to justify it
We're
in
still the same.
68, you could still justify it in 86.
So
But anyway,
give me a let me walk back a little bit in terms of the era, and give us a sense of what is life like on campus. It's still all male, right? The number of Black males on campus are few and far between. So give us a sense of what's the experience like on campus at that time for you.
Okay. First of all, yes, it was all male. At my graduation in 69, they announced that they were going Colgate. And the first class of women came in 70, because it was a recruiting year between my graduation. They waited for me to leave.
Like, nope, not yet.
I know they waited for me to leave. And but up until my freshman year in 65, there had never been more than 3 Black students in a class.
Wow.
Okay. And so 3 times 4 is 12.
Right.
Well, it's sort of more like 3 times
2, 1,
2.5. Okay.
Right.
Okay. My freshman year was a weird year in that there were 7 Black students in that class.
Wow.
Which brought us to a grand total of 14.
Wow.
Okay. And why was the theory we had about why there were 7 Black students in that class was that Dean Taylor, Mo Haskins, and Ronnie Burton were all New Jersey All-American football players.
That did it. Yeah.
Okay. Admissions committee said, those guys will never come. Let's take them.
Oh, stay here.
Right.
Eddie Morris was a track star in Seattle, Washington. Why would a Seattle, Washington track star come all the way over here to go to college at Colgate?
Right. So they rolled the dice and figured, yeah, out of these 7, maybe
we
2,
might
or
get
maybe
three.
3.
We will get 3. And what we did was we got 7, which doubled the size of the class brought it up to 14.
Wow.
Okay.
Somebody might have gotten fired after that.
Actually, somebody did 2 years later for the opposite reason.
Oh.
They got fired because of not enough recruitment.
Okay.
And I don't, and maybe not the right attitude. But so what, the way, students have asked me, what was it like with only 14 Black students on the campus? Well, it was at that time 1,200 students total, so we were hovering around 1% or okay. And what was it like? Well, I used to say that we were tight enough that you could come up to any one of us and we could probably tell you where every other Black student was on the campus at that moment in time. I mean, we were linked at the hip.
My brother's keeper for real.
Yeah, no kidding. There wasn't another Black face within 50 miles.
Right.
And it was a bit scary.
Yeah.
So we all knew each other well. And at the spring of our sophomore year, there was the initial meeting of the National Association of Black Collegians at Princeton.
Okay.
It's down, all my papers are in boxes that I boxed up out of my office. I carried them to my house, put them in the basement. They're still sitting where I put them 10 years ago. But somewhere in the boxes, there's a copy of the Constitution of the Association of Black Collegians. And we thought it was spring vacation. But before the end of that year, we had formed a chapter of the Association of Black Collegians. And we were supported by Dean Bill Griffith. So we had sort of a real, once a month or once a week, we'd have dinner together down in the student union. And no matter where everybody was eating around campus, the student union served us. Then the following year, there was a big uproar because there were 2 Black students who were Africans. Sam Amukan, who ran in the 1964 Tokyo Olympics for Uganda.
Wow.
And Prince John Okella, who was a prince. He was Ugandan royalty.
That wasn't his nickname coming off the streets of Harlem.
Yeah.
My name is Prince. No, he was really a prince.
Right. And he was basically assassinated by Idi Amin Dada.
Wow.
Because he decided to go back to Uganda and stand up.
Wow.
And Idi Amin had him killed. But they were on scholarships because in 1960, Colgate won the College Bowl.
Mhm.
And then a TV, there used to be a TV show, the College Bowl,
Okay.
and it was sort of like debate club or whatever, and there was a what's the name? And colleges would compete. Well, Colgate won the national championship and received enough money for 2 scholarships, and they decided to give the 2 scholarships to the African students, and so by 65, their scholarships were ending, and the dean of admissions was adamant that we weren't going to refill them. We couldn't afford to have diversity.
Mm.
Wow.
And he was dismissed, and Guy Martin took over, and then that class had 20 Black students in it.
Don't, they were like, bring it.
And which is why there were about 34 or 35 of us when Martin Luther King was assassinated, which is the event that triggered the sit-in and the closing of Sigma Nu and Phi Delta. And, you know, and I have to say that I think I matured quite extensively at Colgate. I had, and you know, school is 80% confidence.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you look at medical school, a lack of confidence, okay, you read a question, you know, the 5-part A, B, C, D, multiple guess questions. You read the question and something pops, the answer pops in your mind immediately. If you don't have confidence, you'll say, that's too easy, it couldn't be right.
Mm-hmm.
Which means you nullify all that you know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, because you think anything you know is too easy.
Mm.
And when I walked in to medical school, it didn't take, you know, Colgate was such culture shock to me. Before my first year of medical school was over, I was like, there's a bunch of test tube babies.
Mm.
Yeah, I put my pants on the same way they do.
Yeah.
And so by 73, I was elected into the Alpha Omega Alpha, which is the Phi Beta Kappa for medical schools. And I can't say I was really trying to be elected, and because I thought AOA was for white kids, still is, but you know, I just sort of stumbled into it.
So let's take before you go too far into life after Colgate, get the full run of what's life been like from graduation until now. But let's take a pause, and then we'll come back and complete the conversation and hear more about the full journey. So this episode is sponsored by Hope Murals. Hope Murals is a nonprofit that provides adolescent youth with an interactive experience of creative expression via an urban arts platform that stimulates both mental and physical development. Please visit their website at www.hopemurals.org to learn more and find ways you can support the work they do. Welcome back. Welcome back. We are excited to be back to complete this conversation with Dr. Greg. But before we go in, let's make sure we thank our sponsor, Hope Murals. HopeMurals.org is their website. Please look into this organization, find out what they are doing to expose our youth to urban arts, helping them with their character development, personal development, just helping them be better people, better citizens in this world. hopemurals.org to find out more information. If you are interested in being a sponsor, check us out at aftergatepodcast@gmail. Shoot us an email and we will see what we can do to work out something for you. Make sure you show some love to our network as well, the Defy Life Network at www.godefylife.com. Show them some love. And also, Defy Life has a podcast hub where you can find more podcasts like this, www.defylifepods.com. So make sure you show them some love. And just know we're on all of your major podcast streaming services. Let me bring us back into conversation and start out with. So, I'm really interested to hear your thoughts on this concept of mentorship. And all of us have benefited from serving as a mentor and being mentored. So, I really like to hear your thoughts on it. If you can share any of your personal experiences with being a professional mentor.
Okay. Okay, let me tell you where my concept of mentorship started. Okay, second year of medical school, I took the pathology course and just blew the roof off of it. And that followed on the heels of physiology course. You know, physiology is just physics, and you change the name of the variables. So I had blown the roof off of that. And as a repeat performance, I did the same thing in pathology. Well, a year later, third year, I get a call from the chair of pathology who asked me to come see him. And there were two Black students who were having difficulties in pathology, and he didn't think they were going to be able to pass the course. Would I be willing to tutor them? So I started meeting with them weekly, got them through the pathology course, and they went off clear sailing. Well, the next year, my senior year, I decided to set up a tutorial for all the Black second year students. Tutored all the Black second year medical students that following year. Then I was an intern. I continued my tutoring. I moved to Pittsburgh for the first year of pathology residency. And why did I go in pathology? Not because I particularly like pathology. I just like teaching it. You know, I could get people through medical school who might not have gotten through if I hadn't been there. Well, I tutored all the Pitt students for 2 years. Then went out to University of California, San Francisco, and tutored the Black students there for 5 years, because I was last 2 years of residency. And then I was a postdoctoral fellow at Lawrence Berkeley National Lab doing research. I then arrived in Georgetown as an assistant professor. And what's the first thing I did? Rounded up the Black medical students and tutored them in pathology. Well, the dean at Georgetown had been one of my faculty at Syracuse, and had actually helped me get that job at Georgetown. Well, he left Georgetown my fourth year at Georgetown and became president at Syracuse. And next thing you know, he was recruiting me to come back to Syracuse. And I brought my bag of tricks with me back to Syracuse. And in addition, Georgetown had a GEMS program, which was based on, it was GEMS, the Georgetown Experimental Medical School program.
Okay.
And what they had found was that if you look at Black students having difficulty in, predominantly white medical school, most of the difficulty was in the first year, 78%. And then the rest of the difficulty tended to be second year. And then it would clear sailing after that. Well, they took the idea, take the first year and split it. So you had 2 years to complete the first year, and you were off and running, and did fine after that. Well, when I arrived at Syracuse, I sort of mimicked the program. I couldn't mimic it completely because Georgetown was private. They could drop one of the years of tuition. State University of New York, you got to go past the legislature to pull that off.
Right.
But at any rate, we put together an extended curriculum where you could take 5 years if you needed it, but if you didn't need it, you'd go on through. And Upstate had graduated 2 Black students in '86, just before I arrived. And by 1994, we were the 10th leading producer of African-American physicians in the country. I've got the Black Issues in Higher Education
Okay.
that published that. When you looked at that 10, it was like Downstate, the University of Illinois system, Los Angeles County, USC, all the schools in that top 10 were huge cities. Syracuse is the only little town in that top 10 list. So and that whole, lot of that experience was just getting young Black men and women to believe in themselves. If when they tell you, well, it's impossible to pass biochemistry, the white kids are passing it. What you're doing is you listen to somebody who, rather than taking the blame for their own shortcomings, are blaming the course rather than them.
Right.
Okay. Look, when somebody starts talking negatively, find a door, leave them behind. Okay. And so a lot of my effort all the way up till the year 2000 was in growing programs. The one of the in '86, '87, I was president of the Associated Medical Schools of New York's Minority Advisory Committee. And Maggie Wright and Jackie Flowers and I put together this proposal to the New York deans of starting the post-bac program at Buffalo, which wasn't really starting because it had been there, but the white kids weren't using it anymore and it was starting to fade away. We sort of commandeered it. And each medical school sent 2 students. And if they elevated their GPA to above a 3.0 and increased their MCAT scores by a certain amount, they were automatically accepted in one of the medical schools. So that was part of my ball of wax. But then in 2001, Upstate got me out of the minority affairs business by making me chair of the Department of Pathology. I still dabbled, but I dabbled on my own time, rather than run the programs myself. And so, you know, to be honest with you, I've told many a student that my life is the perfect example of how far you can get having no plan whatsoever. You know, because plans get in the way of opportunities. You know,
Listen close.
once you
That, my friend, is the deafening sound of focus.
develop that
It drowns
confidence
out all
in
the useless
yourself,
noise that can clutter the moment.
you can take
Naysayers
whatever
don't exist.
opportunities they throw
Haters,
at you.
Smaters,
And
the peanut
if
gallery.
you got a plan,
Who's that? When you in your
sometimes
zone,
you'll
all
pass
that noise
up
and all that buzz is just
an
elevator music.
excellent
So,
opportunity.
enjoy your journey, focus on your
career
goal,
has
and bask
been
in the
seizing
quiet
one
roar that is
opportunity
progress.
after another.
Because when it's your time to shoot that
Building
shot, spit that verse, or close that
you know,
deal,
my mother
the only voice that matters
called
is
me
yours.
when I was in
Defy
Berkeley
life.
doing research. She used to call me MD, mouse doctor.
Mouse?
Doctor. Because I was doing research rather than coming home and taking over Dr. Lewis's office and seeing all the black. but you know, I said to her, I says, you know, I'm getting people through medical school who might not have made it had I not been there. And so if I can get 10 people through school who otherwise wouldn't have made it, and they see 10 patients a day, hey, the world won't miss me even if I'd have been seeing 100 patients a day.
And I think that is the power of being a mentor, is being able to have a different type of impact, but still very impactful as you are pouring into others and allowing them to be the best as they can be and kind of meet their potential.
And I think I got that all at Colgate. Because, you know, when, you know, I mentioned Bob Boney and, you know, Eddie Morse was a professor of mathematics out at Highline Junior College in Seattle, Tacoma, Washington area. I mean, of the 7 people in my class, 5 of us wound up in higher education. It's almost like there was something, I mean, you know, the only thing in common we had was that valley.
That valley.
That valley with Broad Street running up the middle of it.
Yeah.
And but you know, we all set out to fix things. And I think that's you know, that was how we got launched and where it took us.
Gotcha.
So with that being said, you know, and I appreciate you just so eloquently sharing many of the highlights from Colgate to your accomplishments, and I'm sure there's many more. Is there anything, looking back, if you were speaking to that 18-year-old Greg prior to entering Colgate, or that 21-year-old Greg exiting Colgate into the world, is there any advice or words of wisdom, or even though I love the concept you said of not having a plan or a plan getting in the way of opportunity, would you do anything different? Would you give any advice to that younger Greg that may have, you know, changed the trajectory or the experiences that would have maybe aided you throughout Colgate and post Colgate?
Well, let me say that most of my mentors basically walked up to me and started a conversation. Okay. And I think the most important advice is be open to mentorship. You know, particularly when you're college age, half of what you learn socially, you learn by imitating your peers. Well, your peers are in competition with you, okay? If a professor, be it at college or medical, walks up to you and shows an interest in you, rest assured you have nothing that they want. You know, you're not competing with them. You know, you have to be open to people. I mean, I can tell you people who fell, you know, I didn't save everybody. People fell by the wayside just simply because they had a chip on their shoulder and refused to turn it loose. You know, my mentor at Colgate were two physics professors. My first mentor in medical school is the guy who went on to become dean at Georgetown and president, and who was the author of a textbook called Henry's Clinical Diagnosis by Laboratory Methods. Well, I wound up being associate editor of the last 6 editions of that book because, you know, basically I got sent over to his office by the financial aid office to see if I could find a job in the lab. And he gave me a job and we eventually started talking. I got to 3rd year. Another professor, William J. Williams, editor of Williams' textbook of hematology, sort of became my mentor. I get to University of California, San Francisco, George Brecker, who invented the platelet count, the reticulocyte count, the Coulter counter, the machines that count red blood cells. He was the most commonly cited person in medical literature for 20 years. Well, he decided to take me under his wing. You know, I couldn't have gone hunting for that. But mentors who really value you will approach you. Just be on the lookout for it and take the opportunity when it comes.
Be open. Great message. Great message.
Right.
A huge part of why we do this is also to give light to initiatives and opportunities and programs that our guests would like to share with our listeners. So is there anything that you would like to just advocate, promote, share, get the word out, website, organization that you just like more people to know about and support? Here's a platform and opportunity to do so.
Well, as I told you earlier, I retired 10 years ago. And the first thing I made up my mind I was going to do when I retired was get back to who I was and not be known simply by what I did. So right now, my life is sort of, I live by 2 rules. Nothing good happens before 10 a.m.
Nothing.
And my week is a Sunday followed by 6 Saturdays. So,
amen.
You know, for the most part, I just stay in touch with some of my former mentees. I was honored this past year by Upstate Medical University they had created these socioeconomic learning communities amongst the students. And it started 3 or 4 years ago, and the first ones were named, there were 5, and they were named after the 5 Finger Lakes. Well, they decided to expand it last year to 7. And one of the learning communities is named after me, the Greek learning community. I mean, I can't think anything to be more proud of than
That's dope.
that. You know, so, you know, I'm at the stage of life that, you know, just looking back and say, being happy with what I've done, because, you know, when you look at the politics today, it drive you crazy. And, you know, I don't have to get wound up in that anymore. So I'll stay on the sideline.
Well,
even though my son is in the governor's office.
A little plug for your son in the governor's office.
And I'm not in it, but I'm near it.
Right. So, look, I just want to say thank you for not just being on this show, but more importantly, much more importantly, thank you for your what you did at Colgate, like just being one of those that we literally are standing on the shoulders of. And part of the beauty of this podcast is the opportunity to talk to men and women who've come before us. And while there are those who came after me and my co-host, we recognize that those who came before us made it a better place for us to be at. And so I want to thank you for all of what you did while you were on campus and even what you did after campus, because even then you were blazing a trail as an alum and someone who we could see and connect with and encourage and give us hope as a student and alum. So just want to thank you for who you've been in the Colgate space. So thank you, sir.
Yep. I spent 9 years on the board of trustees and 3 years on the alumni corporation leading up to my 50th reunion.
See, so
I'm always around.
Amen. I am currently, this is on my first year of the Alumni Council, becoming more engaged every year. So I appreciate hearing what you're doing. This wraps up another episode of Aftergate. This is season 2. Thank you to our guests. Thank you to our listeners. Always remember, Aftergate is powered by the Defy Life Network. Make sure you check out more of our future podcasts and show us love. Remember, always, the Colgate we knew is not the Colgate of today, and it's certainly not the Colgate of the future. Peace, family.